Hello everybody. The world in which we live today is changing continuously and rather drastically. Russia's illegal war in Ukraine has had a major impact on most of the developments across the globe. And my guest today, Dr. Maurizio Geri, is a man of great knowledge about all of these issues. He's a very distinguished figure. He's a senior strategic analyst in international security and global affairs. He's a former analyst for NATO. Presently, Dr. Geri is an associate fellow at the Global Policy Institute and Center for Media and Peace Initiatives in the United States. Dr. Geri, it's great to see you here in Azerbaijan. You're a man of many affiliations, associations and accolades. If I mention all of your associations, we will not be able to start a conversation very quickly. So your expertise is very extensive. It's geopolitics, energy, European Union, and also South Caucasus, of course. Let's start with South Caucasus. So, Russia's war in Ukraine, this illegal war, has had a major impact on most of the developments. How do you think Russia's preoccupation in Ukraine has impacted the dynamics in the South Caucasus, in particular, Azerbaijan and Armenian peace process?
Well, thank you to have me here in the Air Center, where I will be present in the future for my AIDA Fellowship and research on energy in the South Caucasus. Let's start saying, first of all, that the illegal invasion and brutal invasion of Ukraine of Russian government it has seen a reaction very strongly by the West, with the support of NATO to Ukraine that is without other examples in the past. This because we believe that the invasion of a sovereign country is not acceptable today. At the same time, the Putin government is trying to expand probably this conflict in other regions, including Belarus, for example, sending them the Wagner group and sending their nuclear weapons. And maybe also this region in the future, because what we see is that since 3 years, since the ceasefire agreement has been done between Armenia and Azerbaijan after the war, the Putin government didn't help in making the negotiation process a real final point with some proposal for a settlement. What does it mean? It means that Russia wants to maintain the status quo, a frozen conflict that can be used for its interests to escalate or de-escalate at its own wish. While the European Union and United States, they are showing more clarity in the peace process. Also because we have more experience in the West. During my PhD, for example, I studied the conflict resolution in Aceh, the region in Indonesia. And after 30 years of war, they were able to do a peace process thanks to international community. In particular, Marty Ahtisaari was a former president. And the think tanks that have lessons learned and best practices from different experiences on how to solve conflict and make final peace resolutions. In this case, there is not a special figure, a negotiator. There are governments, and in particular a government like the Russian one, which is in a state of war, that has many strategic interests. And this doesn't play, according to me, good towards the direction of the peace resolution. So I think the situation now is in a stall, in a status quo, and probably what the European Union should do is should step up its role and make it stronger to really help these two countries to come to a final solution and settlement.
Yeah, we have noticed a considerable element of dynamism in Brussels. So Brussels and Washington work together. And it's very clear that Russia is not very happy with all of this. And there was a statement by the Russian Foreign Ministry on the 15th of July when President Aliyev and Prime Minister Pashinyan met in Brussels. And there was a criticism levied against Armenia that by recognizing Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, Armenia has changed the whole landscape of peace negotiations contingent upon the 10 November declaration. So it's very clear Russia is not interested in a long-term solution. And you were in Shusha last week. You attended the Shusha Global Media Forum. You had a chance to put a question to President. And what is your sense? Some people say that it is now a make or break moment in Azerbaijan and Armenian peace process because we need to sign something, we need to agree on something. Do you think something is going to happen very soon indeed, or by the end of the year? What is your sense of the negotiations?
As I said, to ask two different governments, but also the European Union, to be a mediator maybe is not playing well in the final solution, because these mediators can play one against the other for their own interest. And without having an expert figure, a mediator, a negotiator that could propose solutions, I see it difficult to make a game change right now. Unless there is really some of, for example, the possibility of DDR, disarmament, demobilization and reintegration of the armed groups that are in Karabakh, armed by Armenia. So if you want to make a stable solution, you have to talk about all these points.
Yes.
Okay, the DDR, obviously the treatment of the Azerbaijani citizens of Armenian origins,
yes,
that they have to be included in the polity and the society of this country. You know, I come from Italy, where after World War II we had also issues with minorities, and we gave in the constitutions rights, language rights, etc., to maintain a United Nation, United States in Italy, but at the same time give some cultural rights. These things are not talked in the negotiation process, or at least we don't read them.
I'm sure the question about the rights and security of the Armenian population of Karabakh region of Azerbaijan, this subject is discussed during the negotiation, but we know very little about what has been discussed, of course. Yes. You mentioned about DDR. Of course, there are a couple of obstacles. One of them is that illegal Armenian armed formations are still in Karabakh. They have not been withdrawn in contravention of the Article 4 of the 10 November Declaration. And there is a situation surrounding the Lachun Road, which is currently escalating. I'm sure you follow these developments very closely. So what Azerbaijani government, from my perspective, wants to achieve at present, it wants to make sure that supplies, humanitarian supplies to Karabakh go from Ardahan, from Azerbaijan. The argument is that Karabakh is an Azerbaijani territory, Armenians living there are citizens, and why on earth they should be dependent on supplies coming from Armenia through the Lachun Road? Why the Yerevan office of RCRC, International Committee of the Red Cross, should be involved, Baku office should be involved. And the drive is to make sure that that humanitarian predicament is sorted out through the supplies coming from Azerbaijan. And this is important for the peace treaty, I suppose, because Karabakh component is key. It's not going to be mentioned in the peace treaty, but development there is key for the movement forward. Do you expect any change on the ground when it comes to this element very soon in the course of August, for example?
Well, I don't have the elements to say if there are changes on the ground. What I can say is that European Union and the Council, Charles Michel, they said it's understandable to have this settlement, because obviously this region is a national sovereign territory of Azerbaijan, so the elements, everything that comes to this region has to come to the country, from the country. Right. So this place is understandable as the place that where has to come. Now, all these elements, they should be put inside the negotiations, and it seems to me that the Russian government doesn't want to make it real in this situation.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, Russia sort of believes in conflict management, not conflict resolution. And from the Armenia's perspective, you know that Nikol Pashinyan, back on the 14th of May, he said, we are ready to recognize Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, including Karabakh, and recently in his press conference he said that all sovereign nations recognize Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan, but simultaneously he objects to the installation of a border checkpoint at the entrance of the Lachun Road. So how does Armenia's readiness to recognize Azerbaijan's territorial integrity square with their objection to that Azerbaijan should not have a border checkpoint at the entrance of the Lachun Road?
Again, yes, there is a contradiction there that is not clear. is not understandable. And again, without a real negotiator and mediator, these things, they don't come out clearly. So I think we are in a stallo, as we say in Italian, in a stall situation. And we need something to change. And I think this has to come from either an international negotiator that can be called in the process of mediation, or the European Union to step up the level. Because the Mr. President said in reality there are US and Russia that they're really calling the President and the Prime Minister. But the European Union is more a lower level with the Minister of Foreign Affairs. They're discussing, but they're not really the main negotiator for the final peace deal. I think European Union should step up and do that.
I see, yeah. And also, I think in one of your articles, in general, this is an argument which goes through most of your articles, I think, and you mentioned it in a private conversation with me earlier, that South Caucasus should be kind of autonomous area. It should not be subjugated to any great power, so it should be a bridge between the European Union and Asia. Do you think Azerbaijan's foreign policy serves this objective in this area?
Yes, I think so. Azerbaijan is a country that obviously wants to maintain good relationship with all the neighbors. At the same time, they are improving the relationship with Europe, because we saw at the energy level how it's important for us, Azerbaijan, but not only energy level. Italy, for example, is the first trade partner of Azerbaijan. We have a good friendship. I think Azerbaijan is looking up to improve and to strengthen the relationship with Europe and with the West. And this case could be one example. For example, if European Union can really make the deal, the final deal, the peace deal, could be the game changer in the relationship between European Union and this region. That's what I believe, and that's what I'm working for.
Thank you very much indeed. What I also wanted to ask you about is the current state of affairs in Ukraine, the latest summit. Do you think that it was a successful summit in terms of showing the global support for Ukraine? Because President Zelensky was slightly unhappy, so he probably was expecting something which did not come out. And second question related to this, do you think Ukraine will eventually get that level of support which will enable it to recover its territorial integrity? Because the support they get now is very considerable, but is not enough. Do you think it will happen?
Yes, it will gradually. NATO and European countries support more and more Ukraine, because we will not accept any other final thing than the victory of Ukraine, of a free country. I don't think Mr. President Zelensky was unhappy at all. On the contrary, we step up the collaboration, creating the NATO-Ukraine Council, which is the first step for the future integration of Ukraine in NATO. And it will happen, obviously, after the end of the war, because we cannot accept a country in a state of war for different reasons. But it will happen, it will come. As I said in other interviews, the attempt, the strategy of the Russian government to make info war and nuclear threats, to expand the regional battlefields, etc., is not going to have any effect, because we are the oldest and strongest alliance, political military alliance. Let's not forget that NATO is a political military alliance of the history. And even if some countries like Russia wants to recreate an empire out of the history, like the Soviet Union empire, this will not succeed. So Ukraine will succeed. The problem is that the European Union doesn't have a united government. Yeah. We have every country that looks for their own national interest, is understandable, but we are also in a process of increasing the integration, improving the integration towards a more United States of Europe that also will come, but with the time, because these are new political animals, supranational animals, and this process also will impact how we will have a foreign policy in the future, a more united and stronger foreign policy, including in supporting a country that has been invaded like Ukraine.
Yeah. There are some skeptics in Europe about Ukraine. They say that, well, this war is going to end very badly for Ukraine, so Ukraine will be independent sovereign nation, freed of the shackles of Russian dominance. It will be a proper European nation, NATO member, but it will be truncated. It will lose some of its territories. For example, there are some skeptics about Crimea. They say Ukraine will not be able to recover its full territorial integrity. There will be some compromises. How do you see the final solution? Will it be a full territorial integrity recovery for Ukraine, or you think that there will be some compromises that Russia may get from the West?
Well, on territorial integrity, you cannot compromise. I mean, we have 2,000 years of history in Europe, in Italy in particular, of being invaded by foreign countries. And until we got all our regions, we didn't have our unity, our nation state. So it's normal that the end will be with the Crimea inside Ukraine, with the territorial integrity of this country, and with the new settlement. That's the point of the relationship between Europe and Russia at security level, the relationship between NATO and Russia, European Union and Russia after the war. And after this President Vladimir Putin will be called accountable for the war crimes that, according to the international tribunal, he made, and will have to be obviously punished.
So, Dr. Geri, so back to the Azerbaijan and Armenian context. European Union is very positively received. Charles Michel's efforts are commendable, but there's an influence exerted by France on the European Union. We remember back in 2022, in October, Emmanuel Macron, French president, tried to be involved actively, but Azerbaijan did not let him do so. But still, France is a player, and it is trying to exert influence. And this influence is not a positive influence. Of course, you should distinguish between what official statements say, what President Macron says in private. But it is very clear that when it comes to the peace treaty and speedy development, French position is not satisfactory. Why so? Is France not interested about the stability in the South Caucasus? Because when there's a peace treaty, Armenia will be far more independent, Russian influence will be curbed. It is within the interests of the West, and technically it should be also within the interests of France. But we see a different picture. Why?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we are not happy, neither in Italy, with the France sometimes prejudices towards this region. In the past, in the last 30 years, when there has been the occupation of Karabakh, obviously European Union was a little bit short-sighted, also because of this French attitude. So nowadays, after the invasion of Ukraine, it's very clear the defense of sovereign integrity of countries. But until now, until recently, there was not so clear vision on this, for example, in South Caucasus. So nowadays, we hope that France is a little bit, let's say, less arrogant in the decision-making process of the European Union, and all the countries are listened and included. All the Eastern, for example, European countries, Southern Mediterranean countries. We have problems also with migration problems, you know, with the France, because we are talking about the south of Europe, and they are talking about they are not interested in this, but we have to defend our borders, because we have sovereign nations, but we have also European borders. So, and regarding this conflict, obviously France didn't play a facilitator role. It was blocking this peace process, and also in some way, supporting. We read from the news that supporting Armenia even with weapons. That is not a thing that is conducive to a peace process. So we hope that soon this attitude of France will be reduced, and the European Union will have a better role in the peace process.
And while talking about Ukraine's territorial integrity, you earlier mentioned that, of course, the Ukraine's territorial integrity should be fully recovered, including Crimea. And we are very glad to see this trend wherein the territorial integrity is a central element. Because in relation to Azerbaijan over the past 30 years, when we were talking about Karabakh issue and propounding the argument about territorial integrity, we never received unwavering, unequivocal support from the West. I remember when there was a negotiation between the Azerbaijani government and the EU, President Aliyev himself, I think back in 2016 or 17, said that we never received that degree of support that Moldova, Ukraine and Georgia were receiving in relation to territorial integrity. But now the landscape has changed. Russia's war in Ukraine has changed the whole range of elements associated with dynamism. So again, thank you very much indeed for your time. I'm most grateful to you. I wish you all the best. You're going to be in Baku for the next 7-8 days, and probably we will meet future. We will have further conversations in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you.